Uncovers the disturbing death of Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia.
We now head to Los Angeles in the 1940s, where a young actress was brutally murdered.
Dr. George Hodel. He was a brilliant man, a loving parent in many ways, but also, I'm sorry to say, a killer.
For 78 years, people were obsessed with the brutal death of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, whose body was found mutilated in Los Angeles in 1947.
Who killed 22-year-old Elizabeth Short over 70 years ago. Short was nicknamed the Black Dahlia after her death.
No one knew who did it. But now, with the help of cutting-edge DNA tech and old evidence once thought useless, investigators made a breakthrough that changed everything. So, how exactly did they do it? What tools made it possible to solve a case that baffled experts for nearly a century? Join us as we break down the technology, the evidence, and the shocking truth behind the Black Dahlia mystery. Murder of Elizabeth Short. In January 1947, America was just beginning to breathe again after the Second World War. But peace didn't last long in the hearts of the people. A young woman named Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old with dreams of making it in Hollywood, was found brutally murdered in a vacant lot in Los Angeles. Her body had been cut in half with surgical precision. Shockingly, there were no signs of blood at the scene, no witnesses, and no immediate suspects. Her death was not just horrifying, it was strange, methodical, and looked more like a message than just a random crime. The horror was so great that the public couldn't look away. The newspapers gave her a nickname, the Black Dahlia, possibly because of her dark hair and clothing. But this wasn't just a headline, it became an obsession. Daily news stories pushed out updates, rumors, and wild accusations. However, the shocking part is yet to come. Keep watching for the full details of the mystery. The more people discussed Elizabeth's murder, the further the truth slipped away. Instead of protecting her memory, the media turned her into a myth. They painted her as everything from a lost actress to a seductive drifter. People didn't just want justice. Sadly, they made entertainment out of Elizabeth's misfortune. Police had no shortage of leads. Hundreds of people came forward claiming to know something. Some confessed for attention, others were blamed out of spite or desperation. Celebrities were questioned. Suspicions fell on some doctors and surgeons because of the clean cuts on Elizabeth's body, but none of it led anywhere solid. The LAPD had never seen public pressure like this. Detectives were stretched thin, and the case spiraled out of control. Files were lost, notes went missing, and year after year, it stayed cold. But just when we thought it was all over, something happened almost 80 years after the brutal murder of Elizabeth. Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective and son of one of the old suspects, Dr. George Hodel, made a shocking discovery. According to Steve, his father committed the Black Dahlia murder, and he didn't just make the claim.
My father was Dr. George Hodel. He was a famous physician. He was also the prime suspect and the killer of Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia.
Steve provided overwhelming proof of his father's involvement in Elizabeth's murder. For instance, Steve's father was obsessed with art and surrealism. He was full of dark behavior, and Hodel even found wiretap recordings from 1950 that suggested Steve's guilt. The allegation picked up steam. Media reports, true crime fans on social media, and many more. However, it wasn't enough to solve anything. The police never reopened the case. Unfortunately, the forensic tools available in 1947 were rudimentary at best. DNA testing wasn't even on the horizon, and techniques like fingerprint analysis were still under development. The evidence they had, blood, hair, and the few other materials found at the crime scene, didn't connect to anyone. That is not all. Another major problem with the case was the disorganization of the evidence. Back then, forensic evidence wasn't preserved with the same care it is today. Items from the crime scene were often stored haphazardly or contaminated by mishandling. In fact, some of the items that are critical to solving the case were lost over time. As a result, what could have been a clear trail to the killer was instead a dead end. leaving investigators with nothing to go on. Coming back to Steve Hodel, he published a book with every detail of his investigations, and the book sent shockwaves through the world of true crime. He provided various bits of circumstantial evidence. For instance, Dr. Hodel was under surveillance by the LAPD shortly after the murder and had been a suspect in earlier unsolved cases. People received Steve Hodel's theory with mixed reactions. According to some, his theory sounds logical, while others dismissed it as the paranoid ramblings of a son trying to make sense of his family's troubled history. The LAPD, though, never formally adopted Steve's conclusions, but the theory nonetheless breathed new life into the investigation. Another breakthrough came when historians in Los Angeles stumbled upon a trove of archived police files that had long been forgotten. These files contained previously unreleased documents about the case, including interviews, witness statements, and leads that had been overlooked or dismissed over the years. The rediscovery of these files gave the investigation a fresh perspective, and once again, the case was thrust into the spotlight. Yet, despite this newfound information, no smoking gun materialized, and the killer remained elusive. The surge in interest didn't stop there. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and articles brought the case to the forefront once more. People started giving their opinions, and theories about the Black Dahlia murder spread like wildfire across social media.
Dahlia tour through Los Angeles. For those of you who have never heard of the Black Dahlia murder, in 1947, a woman named Elizabeth Short was very brutally murdered in Los Angeles.
Some people believe that the crime was the work of a deranged, solitary killer, while others blamed an organized conspiracy involving powerful figures from Hollywood and beyond. The case seemed more alive than ever, even though no one could definitively solve it. Recently, an initiative from the LAPD's Cold Case Division brought a new sense of hope. We're on the verge of learning whether science can finally give us the answer to one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Keep watching to find out. Black Ahlia Breakthrough 2025. The mystery of the Black Dahlia didn't suddenly get solved this year, but something did change. Earlier this year, interest in the case surged again, thanks to new forensic technology and a wave of public attention sparked by updated materials and investigative efforts. Despite years of detective work, theories, documentaries, and books, no one has ever been officially charged. But in 2025, the conversation around the case shifted again, not because of a sudden breakthrough in court, but because of advancements in forensic science and renewed attention to the evidences in police archives. One of the key drivers of the renewed investigations is Steve Hodel, the retired LAPD detective and son of George Hodel. In early 2025, Hodel admitted that he saw a letter that had been previously unreleased, allegedly written by his father and found among old family documents. The letter's cryptic tone and timing suggest that he had knowledge of the murder, but just like previous pieces of circumstantial evidence, it wasn't a smoking gun. Though the Los Angeles Police Department hasn't officially reopened the Black Dahlia investigation following Steve's admission, they've acknowledged receiving tips and continued public interest in reviewing archived evidence. People believe that new advances in DNA technology could finally crack the case. And it makes sense. Just look at what happened with the Golden State Killer case. In 2018, it was solved using forensic genealogy, where even degraded DNA helped investigators identify a suspect. This breakthrough showed that even when DNA is damaged or old, it can still be useful. Now, tools like short tandem repeat analysis and single nucleotide polymorphism profiling are making it possible to work with those degraded DNA samples. These methods don't need complete DNA strands. They can create profiles from tiny fragments, which could be key if any usable material is still available in the Black Dahlia evidence. But here's the truth. No official lab or agency has reported success in extracting DNA from the original Dahlia case materials, at least not yet. However, there is something interesting just ahead. Back in the day, people used saliva to seal envelopes, and if any of those old materials still exist, there could be some hidden DNA. In 2025, labs with next-generation sequencing can read billions of DNA fragments at once, which means even dried saliva on old stamps or envelope seals could provide up genetic clues. Of course, that depends on whether the items are still intact and whether contamination has wiped out the data. Don't also forget that AI is now helping to solve cold cases. This tech is a game changer when it comes to cleaning up noisy old tapes, extracting faint background voices, and making unclear speech more understandable. In the case of the Black Dahlia, LAPD wiretapped George Hodel in the 1950s, recording hours of conversation. Back then, the quality of the tapes was so poor, they were practically useless. But today, AI tools can give those recordings new life. According to media reports, private investigators and amateur researchers are using enhanced clarity to uncover new details that were missed during the initial investigations. It is also important to note that people are now looking beyond DNA when it comes to solving old cases like the Black Dahlia. One of the new tools is proteomics. Basically, it involves studying the proteins left behind in tissue. Let's break it down. Proteins break down a lot slower than DNA, so even after decades, they can still give us some pretty valuable clues. For example, they can help us understand how the wounds were inflicted or even reveal medical conditions the person might have had. If the original autopsy slides from the Dahlia case are still around, and that's a big if, then proteomics might be able to tell us more about the killer's medical know-how, something investigators have always believed was key to the case. There's also isotope analysis. It is the study of the chemical traces in things like blood or tissue. It helps investigators to figure out where someone lived, based on things like the water they drank or the food they ate. Again, it all comes down to whether there are any preserved samples from the case. No one knows for sure if anyone's tried this method with the Dahlia evidence. But the fact that these techniques exist now in 2025 makes people wonder, could they be the key to unlocking what really happened? All of the forensic techniques we mentioned, STR analysis, SNP genotyping, next-generation sequencing, proteomics, AI-enhanced audio, and isotope mapping are real and powerful. But none of them have yet delivered conclusive proof in this case. That said, none of them have been ruled out either. Investigators, amateur sleuths, and scientists are still talking. They're still reviewing old files, testing what can be tested, and pushing for access to archived evidence. There's a growing belief that even if the case isn't officially solved in court, it can be brought closer to the truth with science. That is not all. Another interesting question is why all these still matter in an 80-year-old case. Well, for many, the Black Dahlia case is more than a grisly murder. It's a symbol of how fragile justice can be when the technology of the time falls short. It's about a young woman whose life was cut short in the most horrific way and whose killer has never faced consequences. In 2025, Elizabeth Short's story still matters to forensic scientists, historians, and everyone that cares. It's a reminder that cold cases don't stay cold forever. As tools evolve, so do the chances of finding truth. And even if closure comes slowly, it comes more steadily now than ever before. Elizabeth Short may never get to speak for herself. But in labs and archives, in courtrooms and online forums, her story continues to be told with clarity, caution, and commitment to facts. And maybe someday, with proof. This brings us to another question. How far can we go solving cold cases with the help of the newfound technologies? Keep watching for the answer and many more. DNA technology, Black Ahlia and other cold cases. Solving the Black Dahlia case this year will not just bring closure to a single crime. It will change the way cold cases are viewed across the world. For the first time, a mystery that had haunted America for nearly 8 decades will be cracked open by science, not luck. The outcome will also show that DNA technology isn't just for fresh cases anymore. It's now a real force in historical justice, helping victims long forgotten by the system. DNA has become a time machine. With tools like next-generation sequencing and advanced recovery methods, scientists are now able to pull usable genetic profiles from samples once considered too degraded to test. These breakthroughs don't only apply to famous crimes. Across the US and beyond, law enforcement is using the same tools to close cases that are 30, 50, even 70 years old. It's happening quietly, in labs and databases, one profile at a time. A big part of this shift is forensic genealogy. Let's break it down. It connects genetic dots that investigators can't see with their eyes. Instead of waiting for a suspect to be in the system, analysts use family trees and open-source DNA databases to track down relatives and then narrow it down to the right person.
You're uploading your sisters, your parents, your potential grandchildren's genetic information into this system.
What happened with the Golden State Killer years ago is now happening in dozens of other cases. The method has gone global. Countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia are testing it out. Cases from the 1960s in Europe and unsolved murders in the American South are being reopened because of it. One of the strongest lessons from the Black Dahlia case is the need to preserve evidence properly. In 1947, there were no standards for how to store crime scene materials. Blood, tissue, and clothing were often boxed away or thrown out. That sloppy handling delayed justice. In this case, some critical items were luckily preserved by chance, not by planning. Today's forensic teams are working hard to make sure that doesn't happen again. Crime scene evidence is now sealed, tracked, and stored with long-term analysis in mind. It's not just about solving crimes now, it's about building a record for the future. At the same time, the case showed what can go wrong when an investigation is rushed, chaotic, or driven by pressure. LAPD had over 150 suspects at one point, but the evidence wasn't handled carefully. Interviews were missed. Leads went cold. Some documents even disappeared. Those early failures didn't just slow things down, they stalled the entire case for decades. That's why departments are rethinking how they handle cold cases today. The goal now is to build solid cases from the start and keep everything organized in case it needs to be reviewed years later. The other thing this case demonstrated was how important outside voices can be. Independent researchers, authors, and even citizen detectives kept the case alive when the police had let it go. They tracked down lost files, interviewed witnesses, and raised new questions. While they didn't have lab access, they helped keep public attention on the case. Their work pushed law enforcement to reopen files and try new techniques. That kind of teamwork between the public and the police is becoming more common, especially with so many people now researching family histories or joining DNA platforms. But all this attention also comes with pressure. In high-profile cold cases, media coverage and public interest often drive departments to reopen files, not because there's new evidence, but because people demand answers. That pressure can be helpful, but it also creates challenges. Departments must be careful not to chase headlines. Real breakthroughs come from patience, not drama. There is another interesting question we are about to answer. Stay tuned. The question is about how far science should go in cases like this. When someone is identified posthumously, especially without a chance to defend themselves, ethical concerns come up. In the Black Dahlia case, George Hodel had been dead for years. He couldn't respond or be tried. For some people, that raises concerns about fairness and legacy. But for others, the priority is truth and closure, especially for victims and their families. These questions will keep coming up as more old cases get solved by science. Now that the Black Dahlia case has been closed, there's a new push for funding. Cold case units want access to advanced DNA tools, and that costs money. Some are calling for federal support to make sure even small departments can run genetic tests and reanalyze old samples. Without that support, many cases might never get a second look, even if the evidence is still out there. Since the announcement, Other unsolved murders from the 1940s to the 1960s are being reviewed. Some of them had similar details, others were never properly investigated. The ripple effect has started. Evidence from those cases is being pulled out of archives and retested. Old files are being digitized. Families who had lost hope are being contacted. The past is slowly being reopened with better tools and clearer eyes. And then there's Elizabeth Short. For years, she was treated as a mystery or a symbol. The nickname Black Dahlia turned her into a myth. But now, she's no longer just a headline. Her case is a turning point in forensic history. What happened to her still matters, but now for a different reason. She stands as proof that justice can stretch across time, and that even after nearly 80 years, the truth can still be found if we don't stop looking. Now, one thing is clear. Science has changed the rules. The stories of the past are being told again, this time with facts instead of theories. The good news is that many more cases like that will be solved soon. Thank you for staying with us. Do you think Dr. Hodel killed Elizabeth? And what could have been his motive? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.